Hey everyone, welcome to Carter Plays, which feels so weird to introduce because I'm so used to saying the Nancy Drew times. Although I'm exploring other content on YouTube, I'm of course not done with my Nancy Drew content yet. Many months ago I was asked to sit down and discuss the Nancy Drew eras, and today we are finally doing just that. I have solidified my thoughts on the matter and am ready to share. I would like to mention that the Nancy Drew eras are completely subjective to every player on where each game falls and when the era begins or ends, and I would love to share mine with you here today. A couple of things I would like to mention before getting started is that you may hear me explain what I define as an outlier game. What I mean by that is that is a game that kind of falls between two different periods or two different eras. So for example, I take that as my own upbringing. I am born in 1999 and I kind of identify a little bit with a millennial as well as Generation Z. I have a little bit of aspects of both generation just because I'm in the middle period of both generations, and that is what I am defining as an outlier. It's a game that kind of falls and has characteristics of both eras. They were kind of sandwiched almost in the middle when things were starting to change, and so that is what I mean when I say an outlier game. I also kind of looked at each period of Nancy Drew games from 1 to 33 and kind of based my explanation just looking at the numerous changes the company was undergoing and the changes the games endured over several spans of years. That is where I kind of came to my conclusion to categorize these games, and I would love to know your thought and opinion on the matter below. So to kick it off, I'm going to begin with my explanation of the very first time period, or the classic era. The classic era is defined as games that put Her Interactive on the map. Such games are classified as classic for their ability to age well with time and still give continuous thrills after numerous playthroughs. These games stand the test of time and are still fun. They radiate with qualities of Nancy Drew, which again gives them that classic feel we all know and love. Included in the classic era are games such as Secrets Can Kill, Stay Tuned for Danger, Message in a Haunted Mansion, Treasure in the Royal Tower, and The Final Scene. It's the first 5 games of the series that I have categorized and included in the classic era. So I think for me, it's really easy to categorize the first 5 games in the classic era because it's what began the entire Nancy Drew series that we've all come to love. They are classic because it's what started it off. It's original. And I think what also I agreed to make it classic, or what I find to make it classic, is just that these games, I can play Message in a Haunted Mansion, I can play Treasure in the Royal Tower, The Final Scene, all of these games, I can play them again, and they still have that really nice, warm quality when the first time I played it. Not every game rings true like that. So these games, to me, really embody a classic feel. I still feel that really jittery, adrenaline pumping feeling when I play The Final Scene and Maya gets kidnapped and I have to save the theater. I still feel those same feelings when I play the game, and I've already played it numerous times. So I think it just rings a really nice classic feel. These games really set a different tone from the rest that are going to follow in a different era. They're in their own category. Actually, when you're looking at the games and the way they are designed on just the cover alone, a lot of the times you'll see that these first 5 games were included together in various packs and put together. So it's almost as if these games were already known that, like, oh yeah, these are our classic era games. You know, we always offer these games together. A lot of the times you would see them in a pack of 4, like Secrets Can Kill, Stay Tuned for Danger, Message in a Haunted Mansion, Treasure in the Royal Tower. Those were always usually put together and clumped together in a pack. And so for me, this first 5 was really the Her Interactive team figuring out just the waters, you know, what works best for us, what are we, you know, experimenting with where their best interest in making mystery games stood. You know, we saw with Secrets Can Kill, it was flat, it was 2D. They were just starting with these Nancy Drew games that would continue forward. And Stay Tuned for Danger, it amped up a little bit. We got more of a 3D model. The game had become more fleshed out, and the message in A Haunted Mansion is what really put Her Interactive on the map. The New York Times did a small game review that really put that game on the market. A lot of fans actually were introduced into the series with Message in a Haunted Mansion. So really, those first few games have become where a lot of players, that was their first game that they ever played. Most of the fans that I have talked with or that have, you know, interacted with me on my page, a lot of their first games are either 3, 4, and 5. It's Message in a Haunted Mansion, Treasure in the Royal Tower, or The Final Scene. That seems to be where a lot of people's first were, depending on when they started playing, and we'll get to that in a minute. But these first 5, they have such a radiant quality about them that just is so Nancy Drew, and I think that's why they fall into the classic era for me. Their music, the fuzziness about it, the audio quality, it's so fuzzy. The game's graphics are not you know, like what we know now, and so I think when I reflect on this era, I get those classic feelings. I get such a nostalgic feeling. It is a classic era that will always hold true to its time, that these are beautifully written mystery games. And so that is why I rank those 5 and categorize them into that era, the classic era. The next era is defined as the Golden Era. These are games that are the best of the best. They contain more cultural references of the time they were made, which kind of devalues their classic feel, but they still deliver top-notch quality. They are considered the peak of Her Interactive's work. They are lovable go-tos for most of the fans. And those games include Secrets of the Scarlet Hand, Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, The Haunted Carousel, Danger on Deception Island, The Secret of Shadow Ranch, Curse of Blackmore Manor, Secret of the Old Clock, and Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. Okay, we have to talk about these Golden Era games. So, first of all, included in this list of 8 games is Secret of the Scarlet Hand, and that's actually our first outlier game. You could probably even argue that The Final Scene maybe even kind of teeters on it as an outlier game, but really Secrets of the Scarlet Hand for me was the true outlier here, because Secret of the Scarlet Hand really initiated the beginning of a new story. Her Interactive at that time, they were partnering and working with Dreamcatcher. So there was a lot of differences noted in the first 5 games because Dreamcatcher, the company they were affiliated with, they were the ones that were writing their strategy guides. And when Secret of the Scarlet Hand had come out, they had already they had stopped their partnership with Dreamcatcher. Now they were working with Atari. Her Interactive would soon start creating their own strategy guides, and Secret of the Scarlet Hand was the outlier here because a lot of firsts in the series were introduced with Secrets of the Scarlet Hand. You know, the introduction of Coco Kringle, the introduction of Sunny June, the introduction of a task list, all came from Secrets of the Scarlet Hand. Actually, the first cover that was intended for Secret of the Scarlet Hand, I'll pop that on the screen, you can actually see that it was going to still kind of emulate the same style that was the classic era. However, with all of the changes that were happening with Secret of the Scarlet Hand, they had a completely new cover that they redesigned, redid. You can tell it's a major difference, and this same style would continue for the rest of the few next games. And so I believe that's why I think it's the outlier. It still has, I think, a little bit of a classic feel, but you can tell that there's something different with this game that I think it is setting a new mark. It is setting a new pace. The reason why I say that it contains more cultural references at the time that it was made, you may be saying, well, no, there were cultural references in the classic era, and you're right. There were some references to mainstream culture in the classic era. I mean, I think back to certain games like The Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon and how Laurie Gerard is supposed to be a playoff of Paris Hilton. Curse of Blackmore Manor even pokes at, David Beckham, since it's set in the UK. So there are just more references, I feel like, to culture of that time in the golden era. So that takes a little bit away of the classic feel, because when you go back and you play these games again, they're going to feel a little bit more outdated, I feel like, than those first 5. That doesn't always mean, though, that you can't have cultural references and they age well. Because obviously you go back and you play, Secrets Can Kill, Stay Tuned for Danger, and it's very 90s. I think what I mean here is that these golden era games, they're not going to feel as classic as the classic era. You cannot take the classic out of Secrets Can Kill, Stay Tuned for Danger, Haunted Mansion, Royal Tower, Final Scene. You can't touch those. Those are just so classic, they cannot be touched. And so in the golden era, these were just really top-notch games. A lot of these games were fan favorites, so much so that 2 of these games ended up being in the best all-time selling games that Her Interactive had ever made. Secret of Shadow Ranch and Curse of Blackmore Manor, respectively. The Treasure in the Royal Tower would be included in that, but these games right here are usually most everyone's favorite games are included within the golden era. If it's not going to be, the first few, Scarlet Hand, Moonlit Carousel, it's going to be Shadow Ranch, Blackmore Manor, Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. I mean, we have some big games here in this list. That's why they're such top-notch quality, and the peak of Her Interactive's work is they were just such good games they were getting out at the time. And there were also a lot of anniversary moments here as well. So Secret of the Old Clock marked the 75th anniversary of Nancy Drew. And so Secret of the Old Clock and Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, because it came out in the same year, 2005, they were both advertised as 75th anniversary celebration games. And so, you've got Nickelodeon magazine covering these games, Secret of the Old Clock. I mean, that's a big deal. I mean, at this time, Her Interactive was probably at their, biggest and best. Well-known games were doing really, really well, selling thousands and thousands of copies and making good profit off of these games. So the golden era, these are just really, really good mysteries, great character base, actually, a lot of the content that you see in the Nancy Drew universe world out there that fans are creating, actually a lot of it comes from the golden era. A lot of, I feel like, art, memes, they come from these, a handful of eight or so games right here. Secret of the Scarlet Hand, everyone always is joking about the Hawaiian cookies and the ugly tie and Henrik, falling, and I can't remember, and the ghost dogs of Moon Lake, and it just so many quotable things and just iconic things happen within this era. That's why it's the golden era. It did so well, spoke such a volume to fans, and I think that's why I classify these games within that era. They did the best, they are the best, fans love them. There are our go-to games for a lot of people, and that is why they fall within the golden era. I mean, my favorite game is in this list, Danger on Deception Island. It was the first game I played, actually. So it just, so many good games. And then I played Curse of Blackmore Manor next. So I mean, like, I was just all up in the golden era. That's where all, to me, such good games come from. And so much can be said as well about the music and just how awesome and good they were. I mean, so much good things. And something that just popped in my mind, speaking of cultural reference of this time too, you even have the Secret of Shadow Ranch. I think we talked about this when I was streaming the game. There was a set of books on the shelf, and they are all it's like an Easter egg, kind of a poke to Harry Potter games. They're like Harvey Herring and the Border of Phoenix. That's what the book is titled in the game, and it's supposed to be another cultural reference to what was popular at that time. And I believe it was A Story Retold, Colleen Herman, Little Jackalope. We were talking on the stream, and she was saying that, you know, the team was actually reading the Harry Potter books at that time and kind of incorporated that as just a Easter egg in the Secret of Shadow Ranch. And I don't know if this is fact or not, but that kind of makes sense because Curse of Blackmore Manor came next, and there's a lot of Harry Potter vibes in Curse of Blackmore Manor. So if they were reading the books at the time, I could totally see that they would make a mystery that was very Harry Styles. Oh my goodness, have a lot of Harry Potter style into that game as well. So the golden era is such a lovable, good time, and that is why I categorize those games there. Next up, we have the experimental era, and this is exactly how it sounds. This is the age where several years would span for the Her Interactive team to create a fresh, new display of games for an entirely new grouping of players. These games are lumped within the same era, yet they all ring different vibes and feelings, a direct nod to its experimentation. Although some are good within this time, these games feel distant and fragmented from each other, as if a group project was taken on and each member was responsible for a different game. That's how I feel about this particular display of games. And this includes Danger by Design, Creature of Kapu Cave, White Wolf of Icicle Creek, Legend of the Crystal Skull, Phantom of Venice, Haunting of Castle Malloy, Ransom of Seven Ships, Warnings at Waverly Academy, Trail of the Twister, and Shadow at Water's Edge. These are 10 games that are transpiring over several years. And I think we need to kind of break down why they are experimental, what's going on. So first of all, we have another outlier game, and that is Danger by Design. Danger by Design is our outlier because you're going to see a little bit of some moments pulled from the golden era, and it's kind of fleshed out into this experimentation aspect. First of all, Danger by Design, the reason why it marks the beginning of a new era is because of, again, how much change would undergo when this game came out. I mean, Danger by Design completely stripped what we knew and turned it upside down. So, you know, we don't have the classic book menu title anymore. That has been completely removed, and now we have a completely new intro, and it's Nancy walking and showing us her room, and there's this whole you know, I keep it pretty tidy in here. You know, it's a whole new vibe. And I really feel like the reason why is because the players that you had from the classic and the golden era are a little bit more grown up. And now we're introducing, you know, a whole new beginning span of players. I feel like, you know, if anything, you probably got some new players when it was the 75th anniversary of Nancy Drew, like Secret of the Old Clock and Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. And now we're starting to see just a completely new, whole new span of people that are coming into this Nancy Drew universe of gaming. And so the team had to look at the games and be like, ooh, what can we do that's new, that's fresh, that's different? You know, we've made 13 games. They all have a very similar vibe, same menu screen, you know, yada yada. We've got to change some things up. And that is what you see in the experimental era. So Danger by Design, of course, it looks a lot like Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, and maybe that's why it's the outlier here, because we're still seeing a little bit of some golden era traits here, but we definitely have some changes. Then you have the very next game, Creature of Kapu Cave, total complete changes again. So much so that like even the screen, you can change the interface to different floral types in the game. I mean, like, so crazy, so different. You can even switch characters, so they're really trying to expand and see, what all can we do with our games? What's new, what's different, what's fresh? And then as soon as you start to kind of like get a little bit of a different taste in your mouth with the experimental era, it completely changes again with White Wolf of Icicle Creek. I mean, so many changes. White Wolf of Icicle Creek really started a whole new path for gaming, because it was an entirely different menu, an entirely different feel. The game's graphics had improved even more. More was required of the gaming system at this time. So White Wolf of Icicle Creek, I mean, a lot of experimentation was going into this. And you would kind of see a lot of similarities within the next few games. Legend of the Crystal Skull, Phantom of Venice, Haunting of Castle Malloy, Ransom of the Seven Ships. And though they all kind of followed a very similar menu pattern and just overall style and look. And that all makes sense. They did a lot of more experimentation, like for example with Ransom of the Seven Ships, with the culprit returning and not using as many suspects. I mean, they really, Haunting of Castle Malloy, they took a very complete different turn. It was less of a mystery and more of like this, make-believe kind of fictional, fairy tale type stuff, and then they were like using that to incorporate kind of a mystery into it. I mean, so many different things, were happening in the experimental era. Mornings at Waverly Academy, they had a really big plot twist in that one. They hadn't really had a whole lot of plot twist to that degree. Shadow at Water's Edge, they really amped up and tried to do a good scare factor game. That they had some scary games, they were classified as scary, but Shadow at Water's Edge really took it to a whole nother level. So the experimental era really was the Her Interactive team trying to see what all can we do that's new, different, and keep people on their toes so they have no idea what to expect from us next. The reason why I say that these games can feel so separated and fragmented is because they can. I mean, you look at Creature of Kapu Cave or even Danger by Design, and it's so different from Phantom of Venice and Haunting of Castle Malloy, and you're just talking about a few years difference. I mean, these games just don't hold together very well, but they are a part of a grouping, because that's what was being done at the time with the games. Now, moving on to the next era, I call it this next one the personal era or the social era. I'm kind of doing a slash on that, the personal / social era. And the reason why I'm calling that, and the way I explain it, is that another change came for the games once the players were taken on a personal journey through Nancy's life. The focus shifted from primarily on mysteries to also Nancy's love life, home life, and internal conflicts she had. Now the games have more than the duty of delivering a good mystery, but now also providing more intriguing backstory and side story, and to continue the idea that she's more than a detective, and to continue those stories in other games. So despite the game's growing need to do more, it did not always sacrifice the story. It still created a wonderful display of really good games, and this would be known as a second surge of Nancy Drew games. Not as much as the Golden Era, but definitely comparable, just in a different light. So I also would like to say maybe it's the social era, because at this point, Her Interactive, or I would say probably around 2010, 2011, when Trail of the Twister came out, and that's why Shadow at Water's Edge, The Captive Curse is really our outlier games here. They're kind of sandwiched in the middle. The social media game of Her Interactive really started to increase at this time. We started to see a lot of more contests, a lot of more prizes for those contests, and a lot of just more interaction via social media with their games and just doing more. And I think that's why I would incorporate a second surge of Nancy Drew games, especially with the spookier games like Shadow at Water's Edge and Ghost of Thornton Hall. Those seem to have done really well. I think there was also another display of new players at this time. But in this era, games include The Captive Curse, Alibi and Ashes, Tomb of the Lost Queen, Deadly Device, Ghost of Thornton Hall, Silent Spy, Shattered Medallion, Labyrinth of Lies, and Sea of Darkness. So the rest of these games, they're very personal to the story of Nancy. In the next few years, we would learn so much about her life, some conflicts she would have with Ned, and just in her love life. And it felt very different from the past few games where they focus solely on the mystery. Like every now and then we may get like a touch of personality through receiving an email on Danger on Deception Island from Hannah about Carson Drew, or talking with George and Bess in Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, and Bess has ruined the gumbo and because she can't make the roux. You see what I'm saying? So like we get details in very minor ways in this way, but in this era we Alibi and Ashes, we're in her hometown. I mean, we get to meet and see things that we've never gotten to meet or see things before. With The Captive Curse, it talks a lot about Nancy and how she looks like the girl from the story. She wears the outfit. You know what I mean? There's so much talk about Nancy. I mean, my goodness, Silent Spy is about her mother. It's about her life, her past, when she was a kid. So much talk about her and her relationship, the conflict between her and Frank, Sea of Darkness, the drama she has with Ned, and The Captive Curse. So, this era starts with drama with Ned. It ends with drama with Ned. I mean, there is so much personal touches about Nancy's life within this era, and I think it just marks a new period here for the Nancy Drew gaming series, for Nancy's life, because in the earlier games, let's flash back to say like the classic era or the golden era, we didn't get too much about Nancy. It was just always small little bites, there was always, of course, the joke that we never saw her, but that didn't really come until even a little bit later, a little bit later, like Shadow Ranch time, somewhere in there. But really, and we got some of Nancy being in the final scene. A lot of fans talk about the final scene, Nancy's personality, how she is really sticking up for her friend. That was really a big deal because we weren't seeing a lot of personality from Nancy that much. So to get so much about Nancy and the team really exploring different avenues of what about Nancy's mom, what about her past, and really I think there was a flip side to this, a trick. If they could get you in on some backstory, some intriguing side stories, but they could continue that from game to game to game, it would make you want to also buy the next game, because you wouldn't just be attached on one story and then the story's over. You would have to continue buying their games and playing them to continue the side stories and getting to know more about the main character. So I think that's where the personal era comes in. It's almost like a minor experimentation era because the games still show a very similar design and beautiful layout and graphics, but they're just much more into her life. Deadly Device and Alibi and Ashes, Deirdre Shannon, getting to know a little bit more about Nancy's arch nemesis, her enemies in life. It just speaks a big volume of Nancy Drew. So that's why I put those games together in this era. And then completing the list, we have the New Age era. This is a completely new time of Nancy Drew. Nothing is the same from any other era, although it tries to pull strings from other periods, such as this game being a game where she starts to write a letter. That's how the game starts, and we haven't seen that in several games. it just almost feels like the sequel to a movie that came out 2 decades later, and it just doesn't hold as much merit. It attempts to modernize the story of Nancy, but it completely sacrifices its personal touch in the meantime. This would be considered the second experimental age, as Her Interactive works at what will work best for Nancy Drew in the meantime. It's honestly difficult to completely assess until more mysteries or games drop at this time. But Midnight in Salem, so much change came with this game in many ways that fans are still, I think, contemplating and trying to figure out. And I'm pretty curious about Mystery 34. We do know that Her Interactive has a trademark in place, and it's possible that it's for another game, perhaps game number 34, Mystery number 34. It's just, I think it's difficult to say, where are we going? What will they change from game 33 to 34 based on what fans mentioned? It's hard to say. There was a lot of experimentation with the layout of the game, the graphics of the game, and just how things worked. So, I think with the New Age era, it's all as a matter of let's just kind of wait and see. I am curious to see where it goes. I do appreciate, some aspects of it. I've said this before, I do actually like the more cinematic nature of the game, how it feels more like a movie trailer in a way, where we get these cut scenes of Deirdre and Nancy discussing the case in the car. I do like those. I just wish they were a little bit more flawlessly done. Executed a little differently, and it probably would speak more volume, but I do appreciate that idea. I just think it needs to be executed in a different way, and it could work. It could work. I don't like the navigation of the games. That unfortunately is sad, because the navigation of just about the entire series has almost stayed the same, with a couple of changes just in the turning and the arrows and whatnot. But the New Age era, it's going to be a completely new, defined, redesigned era of Nancy Drew games. So we'll have to see for when the next one comes out. But that is where I would lump the games. It's about 5 different eras of games, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video of me really breaking down my process and my thought. It took me a while too, because I definitely wanted to do justice of where things should go. And again, it's completely subjective to every player. So if you are watching this video and you liked it, please give it a like, and also comment below. I would love to know your thought and opinion on this matter of where you think games should go, just about different games and where major changes happened. For me, it was really interesting too to kind of look at my own collection of Nancy Drew games and just look at the covers alone, just to see where changes were made in the covers. It kind of helped to define where the era would start and end as well, because that also defined a change in the time period of the Nancy Drew games. So if you're watching, just hit me up in the comments below, and thanks so much for supporting and following my page, Carter Plays. I hope to have more content out for you sometime soon. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.